Hi, everybody. This is David Nevins for Citybiz List. Welcome to our program today. And we continue with our series on behalf of the Bridge Alliance, which is entitled Fixing America's Broken Democracy. And I know you all agree we have a little bit of work there to do. But to help us do it is today's guest. And please welcome Layla Zaidane. And Layla is the president and CEO of the Millennial Action Project. Layla, welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. And Layla, I know you have an amazing background, really, and incredibly diverse. And in not too many years ago, I think 2016, you were named as one of 30 women under 30. So I guess we kind of know how old you are, more or less. You can't keep that a secret. But one of 30 women under 30 who will change the election. So Layla, again, welcome. And as the head of Millennial Action Project, I know that, I think anyway, I'll say your primary job is to get young people involved in government and civics and voting and elections and so forth. So tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization and how you hope to accomplish all this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me. And you're absolutely right. My life's work is about making sure young people harness their power to change the course of history through our institutions and through our politics. My story really starts before me. It starts with my parents who immigrated from Morocco and settled in New York, where I grew up. And when I was just about going into high school, I was in the suburbs of New York City. 9/11 happened. And like a lot of other millennials, it rocked me. It really changed sort of my worldview from certainly an institutional standpoint and what the role of our democracy was in keeping us safe, but also from a cultural standpoint, the many layers of identity that I held within myself, right? Like a woman of Arab descent, an American, and sort of the prevailing narrative being those two groups in opposition, and yet feeling like I sort of had a foot in both was a real moment of confusion for me. And, I think it reminded me and it made me think about, the why we're so bad at understanding and accepting each other, and how did those interpersonal relationships really ladder up into the systems and institutions upon which we all depend to solve problems. And so I came to DC to study that question, quickly realized that problem is not unique to the international community, but in fact, very much a problem that we struggle with in our own backyard here in the US. And so found my way to a think tank working on issues that I thought were really critical to my generation, things like student debt, the economy, criminal justice reform. And in working on those policy issues, my job was to go out to college campuses, to young people everywhere, and really get their buy-in and get their support to advocate for those solutions. And what I found doing that work was that young people were less motivated by where the idea came from, but more motivated about the fact that it was a generational solution that was going to solve a problem that they have in their lives. And so it really opened my eyes to the power of youth organizing and the power of coalition building from a generational standpoint, which is what brought me to Millennial Action Project, that is an organization that was founded in 2013 to take that same youth organizing mentality and apply it to the grass tops. And so what Millennial Action Project does is empowers young elected officials in Congress and in state legislatures to unite along generational lines and not along party lines in order to work on solutions to the problems that impact our generation. And as of today, we have about 1,600 young elected leaders that work with us, primarily through something called a future caucus. So essentially just a group of young people in the legislature who are committed to building a more functional democracy and solving problems together.
So, Layla, so give us a little more information, maybe some specifics about how you go about that. I mean, that's a wonderful idea. And I know many members of state legislatures, primarily on the East Coast. And many of them are young and recently elected, and they're kind of rah rah, go, let's get them. And in many ways, it seems like a brilliant idea not to worry about whether they're Democrat or Republican, but to execute change and bring forth some of their ideas based on their age and their generation. But I'm sure you would agree, though, that because they serve in state legislatures, that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do all the time, because the leaders of those legislatures also have expectations, I guess, in terms of how they might vote or how they should vote. What do you do about that?
Yeah. Well, you hit the nail on the head. There's sort of this tension between the aspirational vision of the movement that we're building and the political realities on the ground. And so where MAP needs to live is somewhere in that nexus, in that middle point that sort of helps bridge where we are today to where we want to go tomorrow. And the way in which we do that is simply by helping them be successful in their jobs, right? I think leadership has a hard time saying, don't get involved in this effort, if this effort is really getting results for the communities and the constituencies that those leaders represent. So there's 4 sort of main ways in which we engage young legislators in order to do that, in order to be successful. The first is connecting them to one another. Whether you're in the majority or the minority, oftentimes you need a bipartisan ally to push your bill over the finish line. And so if we can be the person building those coalitions and helping you build those strong relationships that help you build the governing partnerships that you need to get support on your bill, or even if you don't get support on it, to not oppose it, that's really effective. And that's really, really critical in terms of actually getting things done at the end of the day. The second thing is sort of, what are these innovative policy ideas that have worked in other places, and how can we cross-pollinate some of these really fresh, new, effective ideas that a Republican in New York may not have heard about the Democratic sort of effort in Texas, and how can we connect those people in ways that they never would have even met each other in the first place to learn about those policy solutions. So really a pillar of our work is educating folks around policy solutions and giving them the ideas to sort of successfully lobby and advocate and legislate in their own legislatures. The third is training them. So as young people, oftentimes, I know on my staff, a big need is professional development. And that's the same for young legislators. We need to help them gain the tools that they need to be successful in the legislature in order to rise into those committee chairman positions, or, one day Speaker of the House. Who knows, as millennials step into higher and higher leadership positions, we hope to, really support that development. And then finally, really telling their stories. I think everyone has heard the expression, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there, does it make a sound? It's kind of the same thing. If they're doing all of this great work and they're solving problems for their constituencies and they're getting things done, and yet their communities don't know that this is happening, and the prevailing narrative about our toxic polarization is the only story that they're hearing, that's not going to create the positive feedback loop that our legislators need, or that the movement as a whole needs in order to create change. And so a lot of our work is about lifting up the success of these leaders and working together to help them build support within their districts, help them, sort of stay in their jobs and be successful in their jobs.
Well, good for you. So, Layla, correct me if I'm wrong, but you not only deal with state legislatures and I guess municipal legislatures as well, but you have something called the Congressional Future Caucus. What is that about?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So our Future Caucus is a group of, in Congress, it's about 30 young members who are both Democrats and Republicans. They're co-chaired by Congressman Blake Moore out of Utah and Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs out of California. So one Democrat, one Republican. And they meet regularly to talk about what are the issues that are really driving us? How can we sort of align on solutions to things like modernizing our democracy and working with the Select Committee of Congress to actually do that. Our co-chairs both sit on the House Armed Services Committee. And so thinking about, sort of the national security perspective of where millennials can add their input. I think cybersecurity has been something we've talked about a lot. And then also just facilitating, again, opportunities for these young members to get to know one another who are so overscheduled and so reluctant and in many times have sort of assumptions about who that person is across the aisle. What the Congressional Future Caucus does is it actually creates the permission structure and the space for the members to come in and actually get to know each other as people and not as caricatures.
Again, it's amazing work you're doing. Layla, how do you learn of, or how does a young newly elected legislator learn of you? How do you partner up?
So two ways. One, obviously, we've got a great team and they do a lot of outreach and not just legislatures, but with sort of partner groups that might have more on the ground connections to young people. We also really rely on our volunteers and legislators to do that peer-to-peer outreach. We know that that's the most effective kind of communication is peer-driven communication. And so really empowering our legislators to do that outreach, to let us know sort of who we should be having conversations with, and then a team of volunteers that we have across the country as well to sort of connect the dots where there's a swell of youth interest.
And Layla, do you have upcoming events or initiatives?
Yeah, so we do a monthly feature called Our American Fabric, where we highlight maybe surprising examples of young legislators who exhibit every element of diversity. We're talking sort of racial, but urban, rural, in their professions. And so we just had one sort of back to school themed around legislators who are also teachers, because a lot of state legislators are part-time and have to have a job that generates income. Our next one is coming up in September, and it'll be Hispanic legislators in recognition of Hispanic Heritage Month. So if you don't follow us on Instagram, please do, and you can catch those Our American Fabric Instagram live conversations. And we've also got a great event coming up later this year called the Rising Star Awards, where we actually give a literal trophy to the young members across the country, a Democrat, a Republican, and an entire state future caucus that has really lived out these values most effectively and has demonstrated the collective impact and leadership that really builds this work. And so that'll be later this winter, the Rising Star Awards.
And how can our viewers learn more, and where should they go to do that, Layla?
Yeah, well, please visit our website at millennialaction.org. And I always have to remind people this: Millennial has 2 L's and 2 N's. So millennialaction.org. And then we're on all of the social media. Of course, we would not be a millennial organization if we were not. So you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and it's at M Action Project.
Thank you so much, Layla. And not only have we learned a bit about what you're doing to help young people and young leaders get involved, but we got a little bit of a spelling lesson there that I think is good too. Anyway, our guest today has been Layla Zaidane, and Layla is the president and CEO of the Millennial Action Project. Please reach out, learn more, get involved if you're so inclined. And this has been David Nevins for Citybiz List. And just a reminder, this is a series of programs sponsored by the Bridge Alliance entitled Fixing America's Broken Democracy. And clearly, Layla and her colleagues at MAP are doing a lot of work toward that end. So Layla, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Again, this is David Nevins with Citybiz List. Thank you for watching.